They kept calling, and every ring echoed a version of the past that no longer had permission to reach you. The screen would light up, the name would appear, and for a moment the world would pause, not because you were tempted, but because memory is stubborn. Memory likes to test, resolve. Still, you didn't answer. Not out of spite, not out of cruelty, but because answering would have meant reopening a door you closed to save yourself. They kept apologizing, sending messages layered with regret, explanations wrapped in remorse, promises stitched together with urgency. You read none of it the way they hoped you would. You didn't dissect it. You didn't debate its sincerity. You didn't weigh whether it was enough. You simply didn't acknowledge it. Silence became your boundary, and boundaries don't need justification. For a long time, you were the one who picked up. You were the one who answered, even when it hurt. You were the one who listened through the cracks, who tried to understand the unexplainable, who gave benefit after benefit of doubt. You trained yourself to be available, reliable, forgiving, and in that training you learned something the hard way. Availability without reciprocity becomes self-erasure. So when the calls kept coming, you recognized them for what they were. Not urgency born of accountability, but panic born of consequence. They weren't calling because they suddenly understood your pain. They were calling because they finally felt it, and that difference matters. You didn't owe them a response just because they were uncomfortable. The phone rang at inconvenient hours, as if timing could recreate intimacy. Late nights, early mornings, moments when the world was quiet enough for guilt to get loud. They hoped to catch you when you were tired, when nostalgia might soften you, when loneliness might make you mistake familiarity for safety. But you didn't pick up because you finally learned that peace is fragile and not everyone deserves access to it. They left voicemails filled with emotion, voices trembling, words breaking, stories rewritten to sound gentler than they were when they happened. You didn't listen to them the way they wanted. You didn't let their tone dictate your truth. You understood something they didn't. Apologies don't erase patterns, and regret doesn't reverse damage. Acknowledgement is not automatic. It's earned, and they spent too long spending your grace without replenishing it. They kept saying they were sorry, but sorry came late. Sorry came after the consequences. Sorry came when silence replaced certainty. Sorry came when you stopped explaining. And by then, the window for acknowledgement had already closed, not slammed shut, just quietly sealed. You didn't announce your decision. You didn't send a final message. You didn't demand closure. You simply stopped participating. And that absence was louder than any confrontation could have been. They didn't know how to process that kind of ending. They were used to reactions, used to tears, anger, discussions, negotiations, used to emotional labor from you. Silence stripped them of control. Silence didn't argue. Silence didn't bargain. Silence didn't care how convincing their apology sounded. Silence just meant it was over. They told themselves you were being cold, that you were being dramatic, that you were punishing them. They needed those narratives to survive the truth that you were choosing yourself without theatrics, that you weren't trying to hurt them, that you were simply done. They kept calling because calling meant hope, and hope kept them from facing the finality they caused. Each unanswered ring forced them closer to accountability. Each ignored message confronted them with the reality that access isn't guaranteed forever. You remembered all the times you called and they didn't pick up, all the times you tried to explain and got dismissed, all the moments you needed acknowledgement and received indifference instead. You remembered how small that felt, how invisible. And remembering didn't make you angry, it made you certain. Certainty doesn't shout, it doesn't tremble, it doesn't waver. They apologized in paragraphs. You healed in silence. They tried to explain their behavior. You no longer needed explanations. You understood it perfectly now, and understanding didn't make it acceptable. Clarity doesn't always lead to reconciliation. Sometimes it leads to distance. You didn't acknowledge their apologies because acknowledging would have implied the conversation was still open. It wasn't. You had already closed it gently, firmly, for good. They wanted forgiveness. You chose freedom. Forgiveness doesn't require reconnection. Forgiveness doesn't require response. Forgiveness can be internal, quiet, and final. You forgave what needed forgiving so you could move forward, but you didn't confuse forgiveness with access. They kept calling because they couldn't accept that their timing disqualified them. Every unanswered call reinforced a lesson they avoided learning sooner. You don't get unlimited chances with someone who gave you their best. You don't get to damage trust and then demand proximity during repair. You don't get closure on your terms after ignoring someone else's boundaries. You didn't acknowledge the apologies because apologies are about accountability, and accountability doesn't demand response. Accountability accepts outcome. They weren't ready for that. They wanted reassurance. You offered none. You chose silence not because you had nothing to say, but because saying anything would have cost you your peace, and peace became non-negotiable. They replayed memories, trying to remind you of what once was. They hoped nostalgia would override discernment. But nostalgia doesn't heal patterns. It just romanticizes them. You refused to be pulled back into something that already proved it couldn't hold you safely. You noticed how your body felt calmer without contact, how your mind stopped racing, how your days felt lighter. That physical relief told you everything you needed to know. The nervous system doesn't lie. They tried different approaches, softer messages, firmer ones, guilt, remorse, logic, emotion, silence, followed by another attempt. You watched the cycle without stepping into it. Observing without engaging is a form of mastery. You didn't know them growth at the expense of your healing. Not picking up the phone was the first time you fully honored yourself. Not acknowledging the apologies was the moment you accepted that some endings don't need dialogue. Some endings just need distance. They wondered if you were ever going to respond. They checked their phone constantly. They reread what they sent. They analyzed every minute of silence. And in that waiting, they experienced a fraction of what you once endured: uncertainty, vulnerability, lack of control. But this wasn't revenge. It was balance. You weren't trying to teach them a lesson. Life already was. You were just no longer interrupting the process. You understood something essential. Not every apology deserves a stage. Not every regret deserves your attention. Not every reconnection deserves a chance. You had already given your chances when it mattered. They kept calling because they couldn't reach you emotionally anymore. They apologized because they finally understood what losing you meant. But understanding doesn't undo impact. Awareness doesn't reverse damage. You didn't acknowledge it because you had already moved on internally. The emotional goodbye happened long before the silence. By the time they reached out, you were already somewhere else mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And that's what they couldn't accept. You didn't disappear dramatically. You didn't block loudly. You didn't make announcements. You simply withdrew, quietly, completely. That quiet withdrawal was your power. They'll always remember the unanswered calls, the messages left on read or not read at all, the silence that followed their apologies, not because you were cruel, but because you were finished. And you'll remember the peace that came from choosing yourself. That's the ending they didn't get to negotiate. And in that silence, something irreversible happened. You reclaimed your authority over your own life. Each unanswered call wasn't avoidance, it was alignment. Each ignored apology wasn't cruelty. It was self-respect finally put into practice. You weren't withholding a response to make a point. You were protecting a boundary that cost you too much to rebuild. They waited for anger because anger would have meant you were still emotionally invested. They waited for confrontation because confrontation would have meant there was still a conversation to be had. What they got instead was distance, clean, quiet, unnegotiable. And that kind of distance forces people to sit with themselves. They told others you were being heartless. They framed your silence as punishment. But deep down they knew the truth: you weren't punishing them. You were done paying the emotional price for their growth. You had already paid enough. The hardest part for them wasn't that you didn't answer, it was that you didn't need to. Your life didn't pause. Your days didn't collapse. Your world didn't fall apart without them. That realization hurt more than rejection ever could, because rejection still implies desire. Indifference does not. They say it behind your back, not because they have nothing to say, but because they don't have the courage to say it where you can hear it. And that right there is power. Not the loud kind, not the performative kind, the kind that settles in the room before you even speak, the kind that rearranges people's spines, makes their throats dry, makes them rehearse sentences they'll never dare to deliver. They gossip in safe spaces, in whispers, in group chats, in corners where your presence can't disrupt their confidence. They sound bold there, sharp, opinionated, brave, but put them in front of you and suddenly their words shrink. Suddenly it's smiles, politeness, neutral tones, awkward laughter. Suddenly they remember manners. Suddenly they remember respect. That contrast isn't accidental. It's instinct. Their body knows what their mouth won't admit. Because power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it watches. You don't need to confront them. You don't need to call them out. You don't need to correct the narrative. The fact that they can't look you in the eye and repeat what they say in private already tells you everything. If their truth collapses in your presence, it was never truth, just fear dressed up as commentary. They say you changed. They say you're cold. They say you think you're better now. But they only say it where you can't hear it, because saying it to your face would require them to stand on it, and they don't have the spine to stand on anything real. Real power doesn't demand attention, it creates gravity. People adjust themselves around it, they speak differently, they behave carefully, they calculate, they edit, they filter, they walk on verbal eggshells. You don't even have to raise your voice, you don't even have to explain yourself. Your presence already does the work. That's why they talk behind your back, because behind your back is the only place they feel taller than you. They need distance to feel brave. Up close, they feel exposed. They notice it too, even if they'll never admit it. The way the room shifts when you enter, the way conversations pause, the way laughter dulls, the way people suddenly become busy. That's not coincidence, that's awareness. They know who they can play with and who they can't. You're no longer someone they can test without consequence. They remember the version of you who tolerated nonsense, who explained themselves, who tried to be understood, who gave chances. That version made them comfortable. Comfortable people get careless. Careless people get loud. But that version isn't here anymore. This version doesn't argue. This version doesn't defend. This version doesn't react on cue. And nothing unsettles weak characters more than someone who refuses to perform. They want a reaction, something to justify the stories they tell about you. Anger would be perfect. Tears would be even better. A confrontation would give them material. But silence, detachment, calm, that starves their narrative. So they move it underground. They whisper it where it can survive. Behind your back, because they can't afford to be exposed in front of you. You don't chase respect. You don't beg for understanding. You don't seek validation from rooms that were never built for your growth. And that independence feels like an accusation to people who live on approval. They feel judged by your composure, threatened by your boundaries, smaller around your self-control. You don't have to insult them for them to feel insulted. You don't have to compete for them to feel defeated. Your discipline is louder than their insults. They call it arrogance because confidence that doesn't ask permission scares people who survive by consensus. You don't need agreement. You don't need applause. You don't need to be liked. That's a dangerous combination to insecure minds. They watch how you don't explain your absence, how you don't announce your exits, how you don't warn before withdrawing access, You don't punish, you disengage. And disengagement feels like rejection to people addicted to relevance. So they talk. They talk because talking makes them feel less invisible. They talk because silence would force them to sit with their own inadequacy. They talk because saying your name gives them temporary importance. But notice this, no matter what they say, they still behave carefully around you. They don't cross lines directly. They don't challenge you openly. They don't provoke you where it counts. Their courage has conditions. Their boldness has borders. That's not dominance. That's submission disguised as opinion. If they truly believed what they said, they'd say it standing straight, looking you in the eye. If they truly felt superior, they wouldn't need an audience that excludes you. If they truly had power, they wouldn't fear your response or your lack of one. The fact that they whisper tells you everything. Power doesn't need witnesses. Weakness does. You've reached a level where people monitor their tone around you, where jokes get reconsidered, where words get weighed before being released. That's not intimidation through force, that's authority through self-mastery. You don't threaten, you don't posture, you don't over-explain, you don't chase control. You simply exist without needing permission, and that makes people uncomfortable in ways they can't articulate. They say you're hard to read now. What they really mean is they can't manipulate you anymore. They say you're distant. What they really mean is you're no longer emotionally available to nonsense. They say you're too quiet. What they really mean is they can't predict you. Unpredictability terrifies people who rely on patterns. They keep tabs on you while pretending not to care. They analyze your silence. They overinterpret your absence. They wonder if you know what they've said. They wonder if you're watching. That paranoia is the tax of talking behind someone's back. You never know how much they know. And you don't need to know everything. You already know enough. You know that anyone who can't face you directly doesn't deserve access to you indirectly. You know that real confidence doesn't require commentary. You know that power is when your name is spoken softly, not shouted. They feel brave in groups. Alone they fold. That tells you their strength is borrowed. Yours is internal. They mistake your silence for ignorance. They mistake your restraint for weakness. They mistake your calm for compliance. Until one day they realize you've moved on without announcement, without noise, without drama. And that's when it hits them. They were never part of the future you were building. They were spectators the whole time. They talk behind your back because they can't enter your life anymore. They talk because it's the only access left. They talk because relevance feels better than being forgotten. But you don't respond, you don't retaliate, you don't correct the record. Because real power doesn't chase rumors, it outgrows them. You don't need to clear your name in rooms you've already outgrown. You don't need to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You don't need to win arguments with people who can't even say them to your face. Your restraint isn't fear, it's selectivity. You choose where your energy goes. You choose who gets access. You choose silence when noise would lower your position. That choice alone puts you above most people emotionally. They sense it. That's why they keep your name in their mouth, but never on their lips when you're present. They know confrontation would expose them. They know eye contact would dissolve their confidence. They know your calm would dismantle their performance. So they stay behind your back where they feel safe. And that's the truth about power no one likes to admit. When people can't challenge you directly, they try to shrink you indirectly. But shrinking someone behind their back never actually makes them smaller. It just proves they've already grown beyond reach. You don't need revenge. You don't need acknowledgement. You don't need validation. Your power is already confirmed by their silence in your presence, by their noise in your absence, by their fear of saying out loud what they rehearse in private. That's real power. Not being feared loudly, but being respected quietly. And the quietest proof of that power is this: you don't even have to change your behavior to maintain it. You don't posture, you don't intimidate on purpose, you don't walk in trying to dominate the room. You simply remain consistent, grounded, unbothered. That consistency is what unsettles them, because people who rely on performance can't compete with authenticity. They keep waiting for you to slip, to react emotionally, to say something reckless, to give them proof that their behind-the-back commentary was justified. But you don't. You stay composed. You stay measured. You stay uninterested. And that discipline eats at them far more than any confrontation ever could. They start censoring themselves even when you're not around, because the idea of you overhearing even hypothetically makes them uncomfortable. Your presence lingers. That's power too. Not domination of space, but occupation of mind. You live rent-free in the very people who pretend you're irrelevant. They'll never admit it out loud, but every person they meet now gets compared to you. Every conversation, every glance, every moment is measured against the way you once made them feel. And every single time, reality disappoints them. Because the truth is simple. You were irreplaceable, and they never realized it until you were gone. They didn't understand your worth when you were right there, loving them effortlessly. They mistook your kindness for abundance, as if people like you grow on trees. They thought they could do better. They thought they could upgrade. But now they're learning the cruelest lesson of all: quality doesn't repeat. They didn't realize your presence was rare. Your empathy, your patience, your loyalty. Those things don't come packaged in every new face they chase. Now, every time they try to connect with someone else, the emptiness reminds them of what they threw away. It's a curse they placed on themselves. They wander from person to person, searching for something familiar, something comforting, something powerful. But it never arrives. Because the spark they felt with you wasn't chemistry, it was alignment, destiny, divine timing, and they shattered it with their own hands. They thought moving on would be easy. They thought replacing you would be quick. But now they're drowning in the realization that what you offered came once in a lifetime. And the people they seek now can't even match your shadow. Your silence haunts them. Your absence exposes the cheapness of everything they're settling for now. They can't find your depth in shallow waters. They can't find your strength in fragile hearts. They can't find your authenticity in people who only pretend. You were the standard, and nothing they meet now even comes close. They scroll through contacts, through messages, through memories, hoping something will numb the ache, but nothing does. Because the standard you set wasn't emotional, it was spiritual. You touched places in them they didn't even know existed, and they'll spend years trying to fill those empty spaces. Every new conversation reminds them of your wit. Every argument reminds them of your honesty. Every silence reminds them of your peace. They try to replicate the bond, but all they're doing is chasing ghosts, you being the biggest one. They didn't appreciate how you understood them without explanation. They didn't appreciate how you forgave them before they even apologized. They didn't appreciate the way you knew their flaws and still chose them. Now they're encountering people who won't tolerate even a fraction of what you accepted. And reality hits them hard. You weren't demanding. You were balanced. You weren't clingy. You were loyal. You weren't soft. You were golden, and they treated gold like dust. Now they're left with hands full of sand. They can't replicate the comfort you provided. They can't recreate the peace you brought. They can't revive the magic you naturally radiated. And each disappointment feels like punishment for taking you for granted. Their ego dies a little each time they realize the people they chase now don't stay. They don't invest. They don't care the way you did, because what you brought to the table wasn't normal, it was exceptional. They thought they were the prize, the catch, the rare one. But losing you showed them the truth. You were the blessing. You were the shift. You were the upgrade. And now they're stuck with the uncomfortable knowledge that they fumbled something extraordinary. They remember the softness of your voice, the way you listened without judgment, the way you made them feel safe, and they know deep down they won't ever experience that combination again. That realization gnaws at them, day after day. They replay your laughter now, realizing how genuine it was. They replay your words, realizing how wise they were. They replay your loyalty, realizing how unwavering it was. And all they can do is wish they had treated you better when they had the chance. You set a bar they can't reach anymore. Not because others aren't good enough, but because the version of them who had access to you no longer exists. They burn that version trying to impress the wrong crowds. Every time they look into someone else's eyes, they search for your fire. Every time someone touches their hand, they look for your warmth. Every time they feel lonely, they crave your presence. But replacements don't heal regret. They're bumping into the consequences of mistaking your love for weakness. They're learning that strong souls don't beg, they move on. And once they move on, no force on earth can bring them back. They didn't just lose a person, they lost a future. Every road they walk now is haunted by the thought of what could have been if they had simply matured, cared, and chosen you properly. The thought follows them like a shadow that never fades. You were the one thing in their life that wasn't temporary. You were the one they could have built an entire world with. But they chose chaos, ego, pride. And now, all they're left with is the ache of realizing that you were the safest place they ever had. Time will pass, years will shift, people will come and go, but the memory of you will stay carved into the back of their mind like a scar they gave themselves. They'll forget faces, forget names, forget moments, but they'll never forget you. Because you weren't just someone they loved. You were the standard, the blueprint, the bar no one else can reach. And that is the punishment life gives to those who mishandle rare souls. They will search for you in everyone, and never find you again. They didn't realize that once someone experiences a presence like yours, every connection after feels half awake. That's why they wander through people like someone flipping through static channels, waiting for a signal that feels like what you effortlessly were. But the truth is simple, they won't find it. Not because others aren't good enough, but because what you brought wasn't something that can be copied, mimicked, or manufactured. It was born from who you are, not from what you did. They replay your conversations in their mind now, trying to understand how you carried so much weight with so few words, how your silence said more than other people's paragraphs, how your presence felt like a mirror and a challenge at the same time. They didn't appreciate it when they had it because they assumed you'd always stay. But losing you taught them the language of emptiness, and its fluency they never wanted. They sit with the realization that they didn't upgrade when they left, you did. While they tried to find someone easier, more predictable, more bendable, you became someone stronger, colder, wiser. You grew in ways they'll never be able to understand. And now you're the version of yourself they always hoped you wouldn't become, the one who doesn't need them at all. Their mistake wasn't treating you badly. Their mistake was treating you badly while assuming you'd never change. They believed your kindness was dependence. They believed your patience was weakness. They believed your effort was lack of options. And now they're learning the most painful truth. You were never the one who needed them. They were the one who needed you. They scroll through people's faces, hoping something sparks the familiarity you once gave them without trying. But nothing lands. Nothing sticks. Nothing feels real. Because you weren't just a person, you were a standard, a level, a league they never earned but were lucky enough to touch. And now that you're gone, they walk through their days comparing everyone to a memory they ruined. They remember the way you made them feel seen, understood, valued, and challenged. They remember the way you encouraged their growth even when they didn't appreciate it. They remember the way you corrected them with respect, not humiliation. They remember the way you carried yourself with quiet strength. And now, they realize that those qualities aren't normal, they were rare, priceless, almost impossible to find again. They finally understand why people say you don't meet someone like that twice. Because someone like you isn't a coincidence, you're a turning point. And they treated a turning point like a temporary stop. That's why they're stuck now emotionally, mentally, spiritually, because the moment they mishandled you, their story stopped progressing. They replay the details of your presence like a movie they didn't know would become their favorite until it was too late. The way you listened, the way you spoke, the way you noticed things others always overlooked, the way you carried dignity even when disrespected, the way you never needed loudness to make an impact. They miss the subtlety of you, the depth of you, the steadiness of you. And the scariest part for them is knowing they'll never experience it again. Others come with noise, drama, insecurity, and expectations they can't meet. With you, everything felt elevated not because you tried, but because your energy carried a weight that commanded sincerity. They left thinking they'd find better. They come back realizing they'll only find busier, louder, needier, not better. Now they understand why your absence is louder than your presence ever had to be. Because when someone loses a standard, everything becomes a downgrade. And no matter who they date, who they chase, who they settle for, none of them can offer what you did. Authenticity without performance, depth without chaos, love without conditions. They never saw it coming. They thought you were just another casualty, another name to fade away in the credits, another soul broken by their cruelty. They thought their betrayal would destroy you, that their disrespect would silence you, that their lies would erase your spark. But oh, how wrong they were. You weren't the tragedy of the story, you were the turning point. You weren't the downfall, you were the climax. They thought your silence was surrender. They thought your absence was defeat. What they didn't realize was that you were simply gathering momentum, letting the noise burn itself out while you sharpened your purpose. They thought they'd written your ending, but the truth is, you were only in the middle of your rise. You were never meant to be the victim, you were destined to be the revelation. You see, people like them thrive on seeing others break. They feed on reaction, on validation, on chaos, but you didn't give them any of that. You didn't crumble, you didn't beg, you didn't chase. You simply vanished into your silence, and that silence became your power. While they were busy performing their false victory, you were busy rewriting the story in your favor. And when you came back calm, composed, unbothered, they didn't know how to process it, because people like them expect pain, not peace. They expect tears, not transformation. They wanted to see you shattered. Instead, they saw you shining. They wanted to see you lost. Instead, they found themselves irrelevant. You didn't just survive, you shifted the entire tone of the story. They made you a subplot, but you became the main event. They thought they'd closed the chapter, but you became the whole book. That's what true power looks like, not vengeance, not destruction, but evolution. The kind that leaves everyone stunned because you didn't just move on. You leveled up, and that's the part that haunts them now. You were supposed to break, but you built. You were supposed to fade, but you flourished. They can't comprehend how the same person they tried to bury became the heartbeat of the story, the climax that redefined everything. Now, when your name comes up, the room changes. There's a pause. A silence, a recognition that they underestimated you, that the one they mocked, doubted, and discarded became the standard. You became the proof that pain doesn't end you, it refines you. That endings aren't always losses, sometimes they're transformations. You didn't just survive what they did, you turned it into fuel. Every insult became motivation. Every betrayal became clarity. Every failure became focus. You didn't just walk through the fire, you became it. And now, when they look at you, they see the flames of everything they thought would destroy you, burning quietly in your eyes. That's what makes you dangerous. You don't need revenge. You don't need recognition. You don't even need closure. Your success is the closure. Your peace is the payback. You became untouchable because you stopped looking for justice in places that couldn't handle your truth. You let time reveal what you already knew, that the one who stays silent often becomes the loudest name in the end. They used to talk about you. Now, they talk around you. Because deep down, they know they can't handle the fact that they created the very thing they now fear, your evolution. You became a living reminder of their failure. The moment they tried to break you was the same moment they unknowingly built their own downfall. They thought they had the power because they caused your pain. But the real power came when you turned that pain into purpose. When you stopped trying to prove your worth to the unworthy. When you chose distance over drama, peace over performance, silence over screaming. That's when the plot flipped. That's when the climax began. Now, they can't write you off. You're too evolved, too aware, too centered. You exist in a space they can't reach emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You're not a participant in their chaos anymore. You're the mirror that exposes it. You're what happens when pain grows teeth and learns to smile. And that's what hurts them the most. They can't take credit for your rise. They can only take the blame for inspiring it. You didn't just outgrow them, you outclassed them. The same people who once looked down on you now have to look up to see you. You became the climax because you became unshakable. Every scar became a sentence. Every wound became wisdom. Every silence became strategy. And when the dust settled, you were still standing, not as a casualty of their story, but as the author of your own. Now, they tell the story differently. They downplay their part, soften their guilt, twist the details. But no matter how they frame it, one truth remains: you were never their victim. You were the plot twist they couldn't predict. So when they say your name now, it carries weight. Not pity, not curiosity, respect. Because you didn't just survive their chaos, you redefined it. You taught them that not every ending is tragic, and not every silence is surrender. Sometimes, the quietest moment in the story is the most powerful one of all, the climax. And that's who you are now, the calm after the storm, the evolution they never saw coming, the story they wish they could rewrite. But it's too late. The ending is already written. The lesson is already learned. You were never meant to die in their plot. You were meant to end it. You were never the casualty. You were always the climax. They still replay it in their minds, the part where they thought they'd ruined you. They remember the moment they delivered the final blow, expecting you to crumble, to beg, to break. But instead, you smiled. Calm, collected, dangerous. That was the first sign they missed the calm before the reckoning. You weren't lost. You were calculating. You weren't broken. You were becoming. They didn't realize the storm they unleashed when they underestimated your silence. You didn't fight back because you were scared. You stayed quiet because you were done. There's a difference. They thought your lack of reaction meant defeat, but it was discipline. You were saving your energy for the transformation that would make them irrelevant. You were turning their betrayal into blueprint. It's funny, isn't it? They thought they had you cornered, that you were another pawn in their game. They never knew you were the one who designed the board. They were playing checkers while you were mastering chess. Every move they made against you only revealed more about them, their weakness, their ego, their fear. And while they were too busy trying to expose you, they ended up exposing themselves. Now they whisper. They pretend they've moved on, but they still look for your shadow in every room. They still measure others by you, wondering how someone they once belittled became the standard. That's the curse of underestimating the quiet ones. They think silence means submission, when in truth, it means strategy. You didn't react emotionally because you already knew how it would end. And when it ended your way. No revenge, no theatrics, no mess. Just distance, just silence, just undeniable growth. That's what makes it burn. You didn't have to destroy them. They destroyed themselves trying to destroy you. The collapse they planned for you became their own downfall. They were loud when they thought they'd won. Now, they're quiet, confused, haunted. Because while they wasted time plotting your pain, you built peace, and peace is power. You didn't need to prove your worth. Your evolution did it for you. The very things they tried to use against you became your foundation. Their rejection built your resilience. Their lies fueled your clarity. You became everything they claimed you could never be: calm, controlled, powerful. Not because you wanted to prove them wrong, but because you stopped needing their validation altogether. That's what they'll never understand. Your victory wasn't revenge. It was release. You let go of their chaos. And in doing so, you won a game they didn't even realize you were playing. Now, they see it. The glow, the peace, the unbothered energy that doesn't chase or explain. It unsettles them. Because people who manipulate chaos don't know what to do with peace. They can't control someone who doesn't react. They can't guilt someone who doesn't care. You became a mirror, one that forces them to face the ugliness they tried to bury under your name. They call it coldness, but it's not cold, it's clarity. It's what happens when you finally see people for who they are, not who you wanted them to be. They mistook your loyalty for weakness, your kindness for naivety, your silence for fear. And by the time they realized the truth, you were gone, out of reach, out of their control, out of their story. You didn't just survive, you ascended. You turned the pain into armor, the lessons into strategy, and the past into poetry. You became untouchable because you learned how to walk away without leaving pieces of yourself behind. They're still trying to figure out how you did it, how you stood in the ruins they built for you and turned them into a throne.